Wrestling Inside and Out is on the air. I am Brett West along with Rodney West and Jack Lord. We're going to be talking professional wrestling. We might talk a little bit about Georgia Championship Wrestling. We might talk about Backlash. If you didn't see it, Carlito coming out was spectacular in itself, and it reminded you of the old school wrestler. Before we get into it, though, we got a poster that is available on our Facebook page, and I want to go ahead and do it now before I forget, because as you know, I will forget. But if you would like to get a poster, you can get this poster right here. Rodney, can you zoom me in?
Zoom me in there, cameraman. Hold on this minute. Let me zoom me in there. Hold on.
This was commissioned to us and by Scott Arts, and beautiful poster of a lot of the Georgia Championship Wrestling people. We got Gordon Soley, Thunderbolt Patterson, Wrestling 2, Ivan Koloff, Superstar, Tony Atlas, Ole and Gene Anderson, Dusty Rhodes, The Fabulous Freebirds, Tommy Rich. And this is available in a 18 by 24 poster on our Facebook page. And all that money, every bit of the money that we make off this goes right back into Pro Wrestling Inside and Out, as we're wanting to upgrade. And we want to be upgraded and going by 2024 with some new ideals. So you go to Facebook and you can find that and purchase that. And it goes once again. Hey, they ain't too many people going to have this right there. And we had him do this for us, and good poster. All right, Jack, what is going on in the world of professional wrestling? Let's get myself off of the.
Not a whole lot of stuff. The Backlash pay-per-view, I finally watched Sunday evening, and I thought it was an excellent pay-per-view. Really, they did some storytelling leading up to it. The matches themselves were interesting. I think what's the guy, Damian Priest.
Mm-hmm.
I think he proved that he can be a top-tier player, at their company. And it was entertaining. Brock Lesnar, if you didn't watch it, if you don't watch anything else, go watch that Cody Rhodes Brock Lesnar match, because I thought Brock did an excellent job of storytelling.
I think so as well.
Yeah, and apparently he bled, but it was approved, but it was hard way. And he got some stitches.
Yeah, that close up on Raw last night was.
Yeah, but that's that. People say what they want to, but Brock Lesnar's still an old school guy. He really is.
Did y'all see Carlito?
Yeah.
And his appearance. It remind you of the old school wrestling fan, as they were when he would hit the guy, and Savio Vega as well.
Yeah.
Both old school wrestlers that understand, throw that punch way back so the people can see it coming, and they're going to make a sound. And I thought that was tremendous. A lot of times I don't like everything WWE, but I think they always deliver when it comes to pay-per-views.
They do. The Raw stretched to 3 hours. I mean, that would test any of us to be able to get really good storytelling done, because that's too much time. It's just way too much time. But I certainly see a big change and storylines actually being developed under Triple H. And from my understanding, I don't remember what it was, but they finished off the very last of Vince's ideas and storyline things that he tried to put in place. They finished with that, except for the Bloodline. But I thought that was an excellently told story as well.
Rodney, what's going on in your world?
Honestly, for what I saw of that pay-per-view, it was a fun show, and it was a very fun show, and the crowd was into it. And when the crowd's into it, you're into it, and the wrestlers looked like they were having a ball. absolutely having a great time, and that's what you want to say. That's what you want to see for sure. The the big controversy from last night's Raw, though, I'm going to talk about that. We talked about Brock Lesnar and Cody Rhodes. The WWE is being ripped for piping in booze on Brock Lesnar. People they've been doing it the entire time.
Yeah.
All right, WWE's always piped in music, and piped in sound, even to the point of sound effects in some cases.
Yep.
I watched it just to see. You could tell they piped the booze in. But what my fear is that, or not fear, but what my indication is that Cody is eventually, the crowd's going to turn on him. You cannot come out and preach every single week. You just simply can't do it. The other person that I think that the crowds are going to be turning on very shortly is Bianca Belair, because she's being pushed down their throats. Cody being pushed down their throats after the pay-per-view, or the big show in San Juan. The crowd gave Brock Lesnar a standing ovation. It shows that it's possible that, when you're trying to prop someone up, not because of their talent, this is what happens. The fans can see through the insincerity. And I think that where Cody comes off insincere in what he's doing. Not like his father. He's simply not. He's, for whatever reasons, not making that connection. So, or that type of connection. So,
let me ask you all this. AEW, they have sold, from what I've told, they have sold 60,000 seats to the Wembley Stadium. Pretty impressive numbers when you think about how well they're doing.
And especially since they have not even announced a card for that.
So, still, their ratings in the United States, I don't know how they're doing in England, but we know here 716,000 people watched it last week. That's pretty bad, and their 18 to 34 demographic was really low. I mean, is it going to help them add in this other 2 hours of wrestling, or is it going to hurt them? Because are they going to maintain that other show that they have, whatever that other show they have? I can't even remember.
Rampage.
They still going to do that?
From my understanding of what I've seen, they're still going to keep Rampage. I really don't understand why you would, because being pre-taped is the reason nobody's watching it.
Yeah.
If it's not live, what was that old saying? If it's not live, it's not Memorex. Well, we're that's what they're looking at. It's supposed to be a 2-hour show on Saturday night, and I don't know. I think you would draw better through the week, because it seems like you're going to have a lot of competition on weekends, not just on television with a lot of sports going on, but also just out in your community. People get out on the weekend. Now they may draw if they count taping it. I think a lot of people would do that. I'm not one of those people, by the way, but I think they'll do okay.
Both companies, though, very successful. I mean, you cannot argue that wrestling still has pretty good numbers compared to what today's standards are. Yeah. Both are pretty successful in what they're doing, and it was because no show, except for a few, are doing the numbers. I mean, I think y'all, whatever that show is that Kevin Costner, I watched it now. I can't remember the name of the show, but that Kevin Costner's quitting did 17 million people. But most shows are doing anywhere from 2 to 6 million. So all of them were doing pretty good. And so that's professional wrestling. And then they're certainly selling tickets. So you can't argue there. Rodney?
The one question I have to ask, if it's doing so well, why did Tony Khan have a hemorrhage when it was questioned about it? That to me speaks volumes. Is somebody challenging a delusion that Mr. Khan has, and then he goes off of them? any reasonable human being would just say, "I'm sorry, that's incorrect information that you've gotten there," and I can show you what we're doing as far as the crowd goes and the ticket sales are. But what he did was a little bit, it shows the lack of stability or something there to go off on a reporter like he did.
I think it was snowing there when that happened. I think that's what happened.
Was it? Well, in that case, he should have been very happy. Grab a straw and let's have some fun. You know what I'm saying? Last time I saw somebody so excited like that, Robert Fuller was running up and down the road.
All right,
I'm in a bad mood tonight, by the way, if anybody wants to know.
Hey, before we start, let me give this one update. Superstar Graham's wife provided an update and basically just to encapsulate this statement. She said that the doctors are trying to prepare them for the worst, that they don't think he's going to make it much longer in the condition he's in. But as she says, there are people of faith, and she said that's a decision for God that has the final say and not any doctor. But Superstar is a legend for a reason in this industry. We can joke about some of the, at the end of his career, gimmick ideas he might have had, but Superstar Graham at his height was one of the greatest of all time. I mean, people paid hard-earned money and a lot of it to see him get beat. And that is the sign of a true professional.
Something that I put on there today, biggest draws in wrestling. Superstar Billy Graham had to be one of the biggest draws in wrestling.
I agree with that. And I think they could have gotten so much more out of him, but they were afraid of making that turn towards more entertainment. Bruno was strictly a wrestler. Let's just be up front. There wasn't just tons of charisma oozing out of him. Whereas Superstar Graham, he had enough for the entire company. And you could have used him as a heel. You could have eventually turned him, put the title back on him, and he would have drawn Hulk Hogan type money. I really believe that.
He would have been Hulk Hogan before Hulk Hogan, basically.
Yeah.
Well, Billy Graham was out of time.
That's true.
He was before his time. He was the showman before we had showman, basically. And think about it, though, and you're right. If Superstar probably would have stood around, instead of leaving, you never know. I think that the turn would have been brilliant, and maybe we wouldn't have seen a Hulk Hogan, because actually Billy Graham, Hulk Hogan copied Billy Graham. To the point he really did. He copied Billy Graham.
We also have to bear in mind, though, that when Hulkamania was at its height was when Billy Graham started having all the health issues.
That is true.
That forced him out. So, hypothetical, had you had a healthy Hulk Hogan, a healthy Billy Graham into the 80s, I believe he could have been that torchbearer.
He sure could have, or could have been a very strong opponent for Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Could you imagine how they could talk people into the seats? No doubt.
Someone else that doesn't get credit, but was a big box office draw, was Bob Backlund. And people say they want to say that he was not the most flamboyant wrestler, but he wasn't meant to be a flamboyant. No. He was meant to be a wrestler because in most cases he could probably beat everybody on the card. He was that good.
Well, and we've all heard the story of how he did not want to drop the title to Hogan because his whole point was, if he couldn't legitimately wrestle me, I'm not putting him over. And that's why they went with the Iron Sheik for that short carry, because he respected Iron Sheik, and he knew that if they were to actually go out there and have a real wrestling match, that Sheik could hold his own. So,
And he could have. He could
yeah,
have.
oh yeah, yeah.
Bob Backlund, Rodney, does he not get the credit for being a box office draw? I believe he had more sellouts in the Madison Square Garden than even Bruno Sammartino did.
Not from where I'm reading. I think Backlund has been honored. I don't see anybody saying that Bob Backlund was not a big draw, and where I've been looking at it. And the fact of the matter is that the proof is, check out how many sellouts, how many times he was there. I mean, that the proof's in the pudding, if you will. And Backlund certainly was a star. You watch him, you kind of wonder how, but it worked for them. They worked for them, and it was Vince Senior that knew what the people of New York wanted to see, and exactly was Bob Backlund.
Bruno Sammartino was not really. Bob Backlund was a better performer than Bruno Sammartino.
Yeah.
When you look at the performance, Bob Backlund, what he did inside the ring looked really, really good. Not all the time did Bruno Sammartino stuff look great. But Bob Backlund drew money everywhere he went in that respect. I don't think any of the WWF guys, when they came to Atlanta or so, they didn't ever draw a lot of money. But there, Bob Backlund was something else. Who's another one, Jack, that was a box office draw?
Oh, goodness, I'm trying to think. And
I'm going to say Bob Armstrong.
Let me help you. Let me help you.
Now, here's the thing: is that we all know how promoters condition their crowds to the kind of events they have, and that's pretty smart. WWF was not known for having flashy wrestlers. There was few exceptions to that rule, but most of them were just common gimmicks of the common man who went out there and fought, because people identified with that. But I'll throw this in there: for every bit of popularity that Bob and Bruno had, Tommy Rich was doing the same in the South.
Yeah.
I believe he was as big a star as those guys were up there.
And a box office draw, no matter what people want to say about Tommy Rich. Tommy Rich drew in Memphis twice. He drew in Memphis. He drew big time money from 1977 to 1980 in Atlanta. And when he left and came back, he drew a ton of money when he went to to Ohio, the Ohio tours, the Northern tours. Even though they eventually had to move him back to Atlanta so he wouldn't be trashing motel rooms and stuff. But Tommy Rich was a huge draw. When you talk about Tommy Rich today, the fans still, especially in Georgia, they still love Tommy Rich.
Yeah.
Another draw, Wrestling 2.
Oh, tremendous. Yeah.
Anybody in Georgia draw as much money as Wrestling 2 ever did drew?
Not that I've seen. And it was an amazing, absolutely amazing. Of course, we've talked about it before. If you didn't have 2 on the card, you weren't able to draw. You simply wasn't able to draw. I've counted it up. I was looking over the history of the Georgia Heavyweight Championship, and Wrestling 2 they have on here was 12 times the Georgia Heavyweight Champion. 12 times. That tells you exactly, how important he was to the territory. And he was a huge draw. And like I said, if you didn't have him on the card, Dad would tell you, didn't have 2 on the card at one time, you didn't draw. Yeah. That's how strong he was over, for sure.
What's some others, Rodney?
Andre the Giant. That was always a big one. He was a special attraction for sure. But everywhere he went, he could absolutely bring it in each time. And having Andre on the card was a feather in the cap for sure for any promoter. But even when it was low, when things were going bad, you could bring Andre in and he would draw you a house.
And I've heard a lot of people say that Andre was limited. Well, back in our time, Andre could do everything that anybody else could do.
Yeah.
And there's some footage where he's in Japan that he's taken some of the most incredible bumps that I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
So when he was physically able to go, if he had stayed in the territory for any length of time, I believe he would have worked because he could work.
The little people drew a lot of money in the wrestling business.
Yeah.
You put them on the card, it drew, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day, your crowd would come up. Women wrestlers, you could put them on the card. The fabulous Moolah, so to speak. You could put them on the card, and it would bring up the crowd.
It certainly would enhance it for sure. Yes.
The women today, they're main eventing the big events. Thunderbolt Patterson, Jack, big mega star in Georgia, Carolinas, Florida.
He truly was what I guess I would describe as a megastar. I mean, people, as soon as they caught sight of him, they would lose their minds, and rightfully so, because he didn't have to say much at all. Of course, a lot of times you couldn't understand what he was saying, but when he spoke, those people embraced every word he said, and they knew that fight he was talking about was going to be a great fight. And he wasn't the greatest wrestler in the world, but he was one heck of a performer. And man, I mean, I guarantee you could stand outside of every building that he ever performed in, and you never would have heard anybody complaining about his match.
Would you think that everybody on this poster that we got, this Georgia champ, are they all box office attractions?
Certainly.
Even Gordon
Yes.
to a certain extent.
Yes. I mean, absolutely they were.
There's not one of those people that's on this poster that's not a box office draw. There's people that drew money as well that people probably wouldn't even know of. Dick Dunn.
Yeah.
Leon Baxter, the wrestling pro in Dothan. They were box office attractions in Dothan and Mobile. They might have not have been box office attractions, but they drew a ton of money there. Bob Armstrong drew a great deal of money for Nick Gulas. He drew a great bunch. I mean, a whole lot of money in Alabama. But people in New York may not even know who Bob Armstrong is. But he was a box office draw. Ron Fuller was a box office draw. You took Ron Fuller and you put him on the show, and maybe it was drawing 2,000 people. You could put Ron Fuller, and he could do something on that television and go from 2,000 to 5,000 people. He just had the ability for some reason. He had a box office. Now, Robert Fuller, not so much. But Ron Fuller did have that ability. Anyone else, Jack, can you think of that just had that? We know a couple of them. I mean, we know Hulk Hogan. I mean, that's just
yeah, of course. You know Hulk Hogan, and of course, back in the territory days, I think Ted DiBiase was a draw, and I think had he not gone to WWE, I believe he would have, even been a bigger draw. And of course, let's not forget Ric Flair.
Yeah,
because back in those days, I think Flair was probably the best choice for being the heavyweight champion during the period that he was. We all have our issues with the older Ric Flair, but during that time period, the 70s and into the 80s, Ric Flair literally could wrestle a broom and make it look good. He was at the top of his form.
You know what? He had the ability to put him on the card, and he could draw you a house. He'd draw ratings as the years went by. Instead of houses, he could put him on the card, put him on. Hey, he's coming back, and he would draw the crowd. He would draw a rating every time.
I don't know what the numbers are, but I would dare to say that Ric Flair probably drew more than any other NWA champion for the longest period of time. Because you're right, you put his name on the card, he's going to draw a house. Unless he's down in South Alabama where he doesn't want to be. But other than that,
Ric Flair drew a lot of money until 1990, and he didn't draw as much as Jim Lundos is probably ultimately the biggest attraction wrestling ever saw. Yeah. Even as bigger than Hulk Hogan, bigger than Stone Cold Steve Austin, bigger than Rock. He drew more people, if you look at inflation, basically, and money-wise as well, than any wrestler of all time. This man must have had something that was different back in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s that no one else had. But, I mean, he drew 100,000 people came to see him in England. And that's incredible amount of people in the 1930s. And I don't even think television was established at this time, was it? They were making stars out of people, out of newspaper, magazines, and they were on the movies, right? Before they would have like little clips before the movies.
Yeah. We take for granted social media now. Back then, you ran ads at the movie theaters. You put posters out. You worked the town, and they would draw those incredible numbers. It always fascinated me because we still come from that area where posters were your tickets. You had to put them things out everywhere. But they drew incredible crowds for this guy. He had great matches. There was nobody from all the books that I've read about him in that era. There was nobody out there standing outside the building going, well, that was fake. No, they believed Jim Londos. Well, they believed the majority of people back then. But Jim Londos was head and shoulders above everybody. And if that don't tell you something about his drawing power and the personality he had to have had. I wished we had film, to show what he could do, but all we have are the stories and those writers who talk about what a next level guy he was over everybody else.
Yeah, he had to be tremendous. Rodney, any more, and then we'll talk to the insiders.
Well, we were talking about down the Gulf Coast. Cowboy Bob Kelly was another one.
Oh yeah,
that was a big draw in that part of the world there.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan,
yeah.
Junkyard Dog, even drew good money and was a draw in WWF when they really didn't use him the way he should have been used.
Oh, no. Of course, the Crusher, Dick the Bruiser,
yeah,
for sure. Bobo Brazil. Hey, you could go anywhere with Bobo, and it would be huge.
Ole Anderson.
Yeah.
Ole and Gene drew a ton of money everywhere they went. They didn't go many places because they didn't have to. They went to the Carolinas and they went to Georgia.
And another one that could help you build a crowd is Terry Funk. Oh. And I mean, everywhere he went, whether it was in Florida or Georgia or in Memphis, Terry Funk, and he could do it. And you would think, well, some of the other guys would be better. No, it wouldn't take long for Terry to become the number one guy. That's just the way Terry was, and that's because of his ability. Absolutely, his ability.
Bill Dundee, you take him into Memphis, you draw no more money than Bill Dundee drew in the wrestling business. Jerry Lawler, there's so many box office draws, maybe not worldwide, because but it wasn't about worldwide in the territory days. It was about that particular area and getting someone over in that particular area.
Tim Woods is another one. Just spectacular draw. And the Infernos, another big draw that they could go anywhere. From the Carolinas, Florida, Texas, they could draw anywhere. I knew it was coming somewhere.
I figure Kevin
James Brown has started something.
Mako is saying, what's causing all of this? And so Don Hester, how you doing, Don? Good to see you on here. Richard Hood is with us as well. Richard Hood sent me a tremendous match with Thunderbolt Patterson against he was not the American Dream yet, just Dusty Rhodes, and it was so good. Jimmy Golden was on there. Jimmy Golden, such a spectacular wrestler, doesn't give the deal. Nice poster. Thank you so much. That's I'm very proud of that. Very proud of the poster we had. Mako wanted to follow up on this story that he told us last week The follow-up is the Jimmy Cornette is still driving a Watt Bronco on the Kentucky freeways. No police chasing him. He simply has lost it. Keeps yelling Trump in 24 over and over again. Stay tuned.
It's the elephant gun.
Oh, man. Charles Alford is with us. Afternoon, all. Hello to you.
Hey, Charles. I don't think Charles been with us in a little while.
I don't think he has either. It must be. Let's see. Mako said, I hope he doesn't have a receipt for Cody. He's talking about Brock Lesnar there. Charles said the whoosh wah.
Yes.
That's, man, they used to do it.
And they went right back. You would think that they would have said, hey, look what they did to get that response. They get right back on TV and they're throwing these forearm crap that they're doing again.
Well,
went right back to it.
That's because that match has been written out 4 or 5 days in advance.
Yeah, you're right.
Richard Hood said, guys, when they go from hardware to razor blades to get color, they must have done it sometime in the 60s. Because I know in the 50s they were doing the hard way. They probably in the 50s they were doing it.
Yeah, some promotions even gave out bonuses.
Yeah,
if you were willing to be cut open Broadway. And I remember Jake Fargo was talking about how he would take in the dressing room, he would go ahead and cut over each eyebrow and then put the petroleum jelly in there to seal it up. And then when he felt it was time during the match, he'd tell the guy, hit my right eyebrow. Boom, there it comes. And if he didn't think it was enough, then he'd say, hit my left one. But you never saw him do anything. You saw that punch hit, blood immediately. I mean, those guys were masters of their craft.
I never liked. I always thought they should do it the hard way anyway, because the blade you could most of the time you could see a guy doing it.
Are you trying to point out anyone in particular, Brent?
Terry Taylor was a bad one. He was horrible, absolutely horrible.
And we're just talking about the blading, not the wrestling part. I will talk about that.
You could see it. 400 miles. He might as well just took it out and said, "Hey, boy, people, watch out."
Between the leg slapping, he probably
do it good anyway.
He probably thought he could divert their attentions by leg slapping himself.
Probably one of the worst. I would venture was him. I didn't know that I seen anybody worse than him. The way he did it. I don't know. Did Sting ever get any color? I'm not for sure. I don't think he did he?
I don't remember offhand.
Not in any match I ever saw. But by that time, it was pretty much gone.
I think it should be. I think we always said if we're going to do it, tell the guy let's pay the guy. Let's just let him. Let's bust him open, because you kind of saw the guy doing it. A lot of times you would see the guy doing it. And it was always he'd get knocked down, he'd be on the floor, and then he'd come up, and it just, I don't know. I think it took something away from wrestling. It wasn't so bad. It got worse in the 80s. The guys seemed to be not as good at it as the guys in the 70s were. I don't know. Jack, did you like the thought process on when all right, we're going to blade the night, or did you? I just never liked it.
I was always, back in the 80s is where we first started finding out about AIDS. And I knew who I'd slept with. I didn't know who anybody else slept with. So if a promoter came to me and said, hey, we need to get color in this match, then I would do it. If he could convince me that it was really needed, then I would do it. Now, in my entire 24 years of wrestling, I only bladed 3 times. Now, I think I hard waved that many times. And those were accidental. But, they wasn't called for. But I made the most of what was going on in the ring, even though it scared the guys and they thought I was going to kill them. but stuff happens, I didn't mind.
Let's see. Victor Nash said, "Reach for the sky, boy." Victor Nash, hello. Hope all is well. Charles says Bianca needs to be a heel.
I'm leaning that way too, Charles.
I don't watch the show, so the only thing I watch is the pay-per-views. I do enjoy the pay-per-views. I think they do a good job on them. I think they're. I don't know if they know how to build up to the pay-per-view. I think they're the Dusty Rhodes of and I'm not talking about the Dusty Rhodes of the '80s. I'm talking about the Dusty Rhodes of the '90s when he was booking. There was just random acts of crap that got to the pay-per-view. And I'd always tell Dusty, I said, Dusty, the pay-per-views are magnificent, but man, the building to these things are horrible. He said, baby, we're doing the best we can. Look at all 22,000 hours of television we have. I think
it's true. He was absolutely true about that.
Yeah.
It's what he said. He had 22,000 hours of television, too much TV.
I would hate to know that I had to be involved in that process, much less over it.
Yeah, it was too much. Let's see, Richard Hood, guys. Oh, I think I already did that one, didn't I? Victor Nash said they canceled AEW Dark and Dark Elevation, but they only canceled it because it was part of the new deal, right?
Yeah, it is. And for those who don't know, those were internet only shows.
Let's see. The grunting ring announcer went to Raw. Can we draft her to NXT?
True.
Randy said they tape Rampage at the Dynamite shows.
They do. I think it's like every 4 to 6 weeks they'll do a live show on a Friday, and insert that live Rampage in there. But even when it's going to be live, they never really draw. You remember how Tony Khan used to talk about how they beat NXT like that was something to be proud of. Yet NXT draws bigger numbers than Rampage. So, that all that bragging didn't get him nowhere.
Is that because they're trying to save money? Do they need to cut some costs over there? They can't do another live show. Is there an issue with that?
They need to cut something besides cocaine.
Hey,
now let me clarify that I don't know that Tony Khan does cocaine, but if he doesn't, by golly, he's missing something.
They're teleporting managers over at Impact. Are they really? Are they really doing that?
Yeah.
Sinister Minister and Rosemary can teleport now. Oh my gosh! And they wonder why nobody's watching the show. Dennis Mitchell had this to say, but I don't think I can get this on. I don't think I can get all this on here, so I'll just hide this, and I'll tell you what he says. Dennis Mitchell said Tony Khan needs a haircut, and he needs to chill out, in my opinion. A street fight between Jimmy Cornette and Kenny Bolin would draw more money than WWE and AEW combined. And Vinny is having, in my opinion, having a very, very late midlife crisis. Well, I think he's getting ready to do he's going to play Gomez. I think just soon in the new Addams Family movie. I believe he's got the part. What do y'all think? You think he got the part in that?
Well, I'd hire him.
Question.
Just because I want him to work for me.
Did Dusty and Tommy Rich ever tag team? Yes,
they did.
They did, Mickey, several times.
I know they did in Columbus.
Yeah, they did it a few times. Let's see. Who is the most... Let me see if I can try this again. Who is the most athletic wrestler you ever saw, could do it all? James Brown said, mine's Paul Orndorff. Jack?
That's a good choice, but gosh, there's so many that were really great athletes, that came into our business that were big time. Wahoo McDaniel, huge football star, before he ever started really wrestling. And but there's and I see Ted and Jerry Oates referenced down here in another comment. Jerry Oates, man. Jerry Oates was one of the most all-around athletic guys I ever shared a ring with. He blew me up in the dressing room lacing his boots.
I think Brad Armstrong.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever seen somebody that he could go out there and do 60 minutes, come back in the dressing room, and you couldn't even you didn't even know that he went 60 minutes in a match with somebody.
He'd come back and immediately start joking.
This is true. It's a joke all the way back. Rodney, who's the most athletic wrestler you ever saw?
I'm going to go with Buzz Sawyer. Buzz could do some amazing things. One of the most beautiful drop kicks you ever seen. I mean, he looked like he knocked the guy's head off because he actually knocked the guy's head off. But anyway, Buzz could do it all. Just a tremendous wrestler.
Mickey Mainfield, so the most athletic. Ted and Jerry Oates. If you've not seen Ted and Jerry Oates, they deserve to be in a top spot anywhere. They were so good and so smooth in the wrestling ring.
Yes, they were.
I mean, just so good in the ring, and they don't get the credit they deserve. They really and truly don't. The Sheik, the Iron Sheik, I guess it's the Iron Sheik, because I don't think the original Sheik, did he work for the WWF?
I don't believe he ever did.
I don't think he did, but
actually the Sheik did work before. He was there twice.
okay.
He had a different name. He wasn't the Iron Sheik at the time, and I cannot think of about what his name was at the time. But it was
Ball Farhat.
I cannot remember. It was it'll come to me later on, hopefully.
Richard Hood, Dusty Rhodes was a box office draw. Tremendous. Put him on the card. You could be your crowds could be down. Put Dusty Rhodes on it. He was going to bring it to the Wrestling Bear. He don't get any credit either. He'd draw a crowd too back in the day. Tony Atlas, box office attraction. Yes, Tony Atlas could do so. He had that ability.
So impressive, and he was not one of the cookie cutter wrestlers. He had the physique at the time and tremendous personality, able to connect with the wrestling fans.
Yeah, he just and looked so good. Looked better than everybody did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gave it to a level, made all the other wrestlers want to work out and
a down to earth guy. I always thought. Many people don't. He seemed to went off the deep end, I think, here at the end, but never a trouble out of Tony Atlas. Never that we saw. I mean, he was always the go-to guy in Georgia.
And you wouldn't think he would buy a bunch of cookies, but he bought a bunch of cookies from me one time through the school fundraising program we had. And I'm talking like 20 or 30 boxes. Now, I don't think Tony Atlas ate those. I think he must have given them away.
I guarantee he gave them away.
Yeah, because I don't think he was eating.
He would probably give them to the kids. He said, "Here's your box of cookies, kids."
Yeah, I would think so.
Wouldn't doubt it. If he took them, he probably was out there throwing them out into the audience.
Because I don't see him. I think he just did it to help, because you got some kind of prize or something if you sold a lot. Tony was always good to us. Always. Never was mean to us. Never was. Always treated us good. So can't say nothing bad about Tony. Jerry Lawler, Memphis draw, but he was office. But there's people that was office. George Goulas was office. He didn't draw any houses. Jerry was office, but really, Jerry never really drew a lot of money. He drew because he was in tag matches with people who drew money, yeah. but he never drew the money. I mean, really. But Jerry Lawler still drew, and he still could draw. Put him on the card, he would draw.
Yeah, he did, and I think he did reasonably well in Georgia when he was there in '74. I saw some stuff where he was drawing houses in San Antonio. So, yeah.
Well, Jerry was in a position that he knew how to highlight the best of him.
Yeah.
And that's smart.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of people. Bulldog Bob Brown drew a lot of money for a short amount of time, but By the time we were there, he wasn't drawing too much money in Kansas City. Not for a long period of time. Look how long Jerry Lawler did draw money there. Right, for at least 10 years, you could put Jerry Lawler on the card and he'd draw a house.
Yeah,
it all went down the hill when they had Cat. The one thing you have to be careful: don't be playing with the cat. That'll ruin your career. Cost you a lot of money. Don't do it. Down $5 million for what I hear.
For Nick Gillis, Jackie Fargo.
Yep.
Big time draw. And not only for Nick Gillis, Roy Welch, but he went other places. They Jackie Fargo and Don had some great crowds and gates at in Madison Square Garden in New York, and part of the main event. So they drew there as well.
Yeah, because that was when they first, or when we had some programs and it says direct from Madison Square Garden, the Fabulous Fargos.
Yeah, on the main events there.
Didn't Toots Mont try to entice them to come and be his world heavyweight champion for?
I think so. Because they were there in the 50s. So Tojo Yamamoto drew a lot of money. And as a heel and a babyface for Nick Goulas and Roy Welch. Richard Hood, guys, didn't Bruno draw big in the Northeast because of his Italian heritage?
Yeah,
it had a lot to do with it. But he was one big dude, though.
Yeah.
Very impressive when he came out there.
He not only drew there, he drew Canada. He drew a lot through the northern states, just about everywhere he went. He didn't draw in the South, but we're used to a different style of wrestling down here.
James Brown asked the question, where else did Pac Song work besides Florida? He worked Georgia?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure. I'm not for sure if he worked anywhere else, but I don't remember him working anywhere else. Do y'all? I know Georgia and Florida.
Didn't he pass away though, fairly young?
I think he did. Maybe sometime in the 80s.
I was thinking he went to Texas, but I can't be 100%.
Yeah, I seem to remember that Gary Hart tried to book him on a lot of stuff because he liked him, but that his health problems came about, I believe, while he was in Texas, and eventually he just decided to return home and lived out the next year or so at home before he died.
Drew a lot of money. Yeah. Pac Song drew a lot of money everywhere he went, because wasn't it Pac Song when Dusty Rhodes turns, right?
Yes,
becomes the American Dream. I think it's Pac Song part of that. So I remember Pac Song very well. When you wake up in the morning and you go into your living room and you see a big Korean Pac Song laying there, he had one huge head. It could scare the living crap out of you when you're 8 years old. So it was. You remember that, Rodney?
Yes. Yes, we went in to turn. It was Saturday morning. It was our time to watch TV, and we turned the TV on to watch cartoons. And there he said, there he's laying sleeping on the couch. Whoa! We ran into the bedroom. Somebody's laying on the couch. Somebody's like,
excellent.
Shut up. Dad said, shut up. Go to the bedroom. Try and sleep. Leave him alone.
Hey, this is Ebenezer Paka Waka Leka Duka Dupalis.
Paka Waka Dopolis.
The biggest crowd I ever saw was in Macon when Armstrong wrestled Dory for the title.
Wow.
Good deal.
Was that Mr. Papa Daka Baka Laka Laka does? What arena was that in? Ebenezer. Papa Laka Laka Laka.
Tony Allen and Bo Brazil could draw a house.
Yes.
Also, in my opinion, yeah, Dennis. Michael Barr is with us. I don't think Michael Barr's been with us in a while, has he?
No, he has not. And Michael, I've got a package I've got to send you, and I keep forgetting to mail it. I will try to do that this week.
Thanksgiving under the Omni, Sheik versus Abdullah, a complete sellout. Mickey Mayfield. And then would this been the first time they did the 1976, 1974, somewhere around there? Would that have been the first time, Mickey? I don't think did Sheik come back and work in Atlanta after 1979?
I don't recall him. I don't recall him back. No, I don't. Because you have to remember 1980 is when Georgia went to Ohio, and then that was the end of that.
James Brown, the Von Erichs in Dallas, yes. Rock stars. They were just rock stars. I'm telling you. Just all the deaths there, I think, killed that. I think that's just, I don't think it was bad wrestling. I think it was just.
No, I think people wound up being too sad to watch.
Yeah.
Too many memories it brought back.
JYD for Bill Watts, yes.
Yeah.
Michael, Jerry Lawler, biggest draw. He was a big draw. Him and Bill Dundee drew a lot of houses together. They really did. Michael Barr had the chance to meet Leon, Bob, Ron, and a host of wrestlers here in the Southeast, and each one of them, Leon Baxter. The Wrestling Pro drew a lot of money in Dothan and Mobile and that area. Bob Armstrong drew a ton of money. Not Bob Ellis, Bob Kelly drew a ton of money there. And just
Eddie Sullivan, Don Carson's another.
Yep. So Richard Hood, the Freebirds.
Oh, yeah.
Box office draw almost everywhere they went, except for that little brief stint they had in WWF. I think they were there a month before they were fired.
That I just don't believe that their gimmick would have worked there.
No.
Vince hated the South, so he was never going to give them the push they had to have.
No.
It was designed to fail right off the bat because anybody with any sense would not have brought the Freebirds in like they did. They should have been heels right off the bat.
Jim Duggan never was used in WWF the way they should have used him.
No.
They never got what they could have got out of Jim Duggan. They never allowed him to do. I mean, he got over, but just think if they allowed him to do what he did in Mid-South, how much money he would have drew. He would have drew a ton of money. I mean, he made a lot of money for Vince. I'm not saying that, but if they would have let him do that, he would have drew even more because they never let his personality come out there, like he did in Mid-South. The interviews that is exactly what got Jim Duggan over in Louisiana. Go back and watch those. Just tremendous. I just watched one just recently, and we're going to play it on here next week. I'm going to find a play on here next week where he talks about having a match with the name is escaping me. Now I can't remember that, but I'll play it next week. Very good interview, and you'll see why he got over in Louisiana. James Brown, California, Roddy Piper and Buddy Rose.
Well, I know the Pacific Northwest. I don't remember Buddy doing a ton of California stuff, but you had Pat Patterson in California.
Ray Stevens.
Ray Stevens. They were major draw for a long time.
I think it was Piper and Chavo Guerrero. They did big time business in California.
Yeah.
Ebenezer said, "Hey, have y'all mentioned Rich? I was under the impression he was huge star.
Yeah,
he really Georgie. He got over, unbelievable.
Well, and what we saw last week on the broadcast here, doing big things in Memphis as well for Roy Welch, Jerry Jarrett, Harry Thornton, Nick Ulis. He was doing big business.
Abdullah was a big draw. And he was an attraction. You put him on the card, talk about he would do great.
Huge in Australia, huge in Puerto Rico and Japan, and then of course here in the States.
Ric Flair up the territories and drawing ratings. Yes, he did. The Rock was box office. Yes, he was. He was over. Man, when he would come out, people would go nuts. Mickey Mayfield, Dusty, put butts in seats more than anybody. And he did. But, in Atlanta, Wrestling 2 probably put more people than Dusty Rhodes did.
Yeah, I believe that.
In the Georgia area. And then Thunderbolt Patterson would have to come after that. Drew a ton of money. And if you went back even further than that, you could probably say Don McIntyre drew a lot of money. Ray Gunkel drew a lot of money in wrestling. Yeah, so there were people before Wrestling 2, but I think the longevity of Wrestling 2, each and every week, he just constantly drew with everybody they put him against. Steve Austin was a box office draw. Oh yes, and such a character. He was such, and he was a breath of fresh air from what they were doing in WWF at the time, because I think wasn't that during the right after the era of all the groups that they were doing, that every kind of group you could think of.
Yes,
yeah.
James Brown, Brody and Hanson, Terry Gordy drew a ton of money, was over big time in Japan.
Yeah. Hanson, I believe, would have been. I think he was a draw in Georgia, but I think he could have been a major draw. But he kept going back to Japan all the time.
Yeah, and you couldn't blame him because that's where he was making his money. Dino, I can't put this all on here, but Mako said Dino Bravo in Montreal, and the territory was bigger than Hogan. Hogan refused to work versus Bravo in Montreal because Bravo would have been way over than Hogan. So they teamed him up with Bravo. Hey, Jacques Rougeau, the Mountie, he actually defeated Hulk Hogan in his and somewhere in there when he ran a show. Michael Barr, Brent Jaguarotti, is it possible that too many new promotions that are starting here and in wrestling at the same time as are losing fans' interest?
I don't think they're losing anybody's interest. I just don't think the crowd overall is there like it used to be. Is that the product's problem? I don't know. I think there's definitely an audience out there for more traditional type wrestling. It's just nobody's bringing that to them. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, I think it's there. I think it is there. I think the wrestling fans are there. It shows 60,000 people bought tickets. And
let's be honest, there is not a huge difference in AEW and WWE, which I think is the problem with AEW, is that they're just copying the style of WWE, and you're never going to do it as good as them at what they do.
Well, let's just, if I could, just one of the big headlines right here. CM Punk is going to be back on Dynamite, from what I understand. And they're going to do that new innovation that they've started to do, where they're going to have split off into two different brands. This is going to change everything, because it's never been done ever. It's just absolutely. And I gotta show this, if you don't mind, Brent. I'm going to show this. This right here is going to set the world on fire. Right here. This is their AEW heavyweight champion, doing what comes natural to him. Take a look at that, ladies and gentlemen. He's been up all night sucking on them pickles like that. You see that? This right here is the reason that everybody wants to know why he was champion. Right here, we know. Look at that. He worked all night. Look at those circles under his eyes. He's been up all night long sucking them pickles.
I tried to watch AEW a couple of weeks ago. And
that's a star right there.
I set myself up as that the first time MJF came out and started cussing, I was going to turn it off. Well, 2 matches in, MJF comes out, and the F-bomb was the first thing out of his mouth. Man. So I just turned it off.
Boy, the TBS and that Turner organization has changed tremendously throughout the years.
Yeah.
Malkamania. Boy, they were over in the Carolinas there for a while.
Especially in Anderson, their hometown.
James Brown said Rodney and Kevin Sullivan. That match could draw any arena in the USA. Ricky Martel was just under Bravo, still huge, but not Bravo from Mako. Terry Funk in an empty crowd match with Lawler. Tremendous stuff.
That's just talent. Absolute, unbelievable talent right there.
And was not done the way they would do it today.
Now, this Brock Lesnar, this Brock Lesnar Cody match may be an empty arena for their fight coming up.
That's just because they can't sell on tickets to that wasn't because they're having a.
Well, they can pipe in any kind of crowd noise they need.
Wahoo McDaniel was a big draw, yes, for years.
Absolutely, he was.
Let's see, the Sheik. Actually, the Sheik versus Bobo Brazil went every state available.
No doubt. No doubt.
Ernie Ladd. Yes, Ernie Ladd was a big draw in wrestling. He would, he never stayed in any place a very long period of time because he didn't have to. He could go to he could be in Atlanta for a while, then he could leave there, go to Florida, then he'd go to Louisiana, then he could go to, everywhere he went, he drew money. And he knew that he didn't want to do 3 months was probably the most he ever stayed somewhere, except while he was booking. I don't know. I guess he was in Mid-South long because he was the booker there for a while. Let's see. Didn't your wrestling card at the bottom, exhibition of strength and science? They did that in Ontario.
I like that.
I do. I think that's great. Ours had wrestling, King of Sports here.
I think Jack answered that 3 times, and then 3 times the.
Yeah, 6 times total, and I just never liked color. I just thought that was kind of a lazy way to get sympathy or to get heat, and I think I always thought that if you just sold it, and hey, wrestle, told the story. I thought that worked better than any amount of blood that you could spill out there. Now, I could see a time back in our day when it was necessary, but it still happened way too often.
Yes, it was done too often, really, especially at the end it was. If you were going to do it, you really needed to do it to build to a.
If it enhances the storyline, yes. If it's just there because you didn't have anything else to put in that spot, it's a waste of time.
Exactly.
It's a waste of effort.
Exactly.
Michael Barr, is that what they call the bloodbath matches? There was a difference in color and bloodbath yellow. Most of the time, Abdullah Butcher's matches were always pretty bloodbath.
Well, you always knew that Abdullah, Tommy, any of those that really enjoyed doing it, they were going to be referred to. But that's by fans and magazines as bloodbath. To us, it's simply getting colored. It didn't matter how many gallons came out.
This is true. Would Rodney have a death match with light tubes?
No. Only somebody was dumb would do something like that. What kind of stupid people would have a match with light bulbs or tubes or whatever? That's dumb. What kind of stupid people would do that? Only a stupid, dumb person would do something like that.
I saw a clip of a match. Somebody shared it, and I saw it. And it was, they'd put the light tubes, there was a bunch of them, taped together across 2 chairs. And this guy comes off the top rope, and nobody threw him. He just flipped off the top rope. So he's thinking like you would land on a table. You're going to hit it, and it's going to break your fall. Well, instead, he goes head first through all those light bulbs, hits his head on the canvas, and sets up and starts picking glass out of his head, out of his hands. And I'm thinking, you are not the smartest kid that's ever been in this.
Nope.
If you ever want to see some of the worst wrestling in the history of wrestling, go find the Carpetbagger. He is a YouTuber, and they had some kind of Bigfoot convention in Townsend, Tennessee, and go watch those matches that's on there. I don't know who those wrestlers are, but they need to keep their day job because they were horrible. It was embarrassing. I got embarrassed for them, and I wasn't even there. It was horrible. Absolutely.
I know a handful of deathmatch wrestlers like that can actually work. and they incorporate telling stories into even all those wild things that they do. But literally, I can count them on one hand of the ones who knew what they were doing and could get that over. That's not my thing. It never has been. I love those guys to death as human beings, but that's not my thing.
Mickey Mayfield, I agree with you about Jerry and Ted Oates. That's Richard Hood. Jerry Oates is my favorite wrestler, Richard Hood. Paul says it was the great Hussein Arad.
That's right. Who was he had he was managed? Was it the Grand Wizard Paul? I was just shocked to see it. I didn't realize that Roddy Piper had also been in the WWF before he came there, but he was.
The Sheik worked with Bruno. I don't know how long it was.
I have seen that if it was from Indianapolis, WWA, they were building that up big time. Every time Dick the Bruiser would go after the Sheik, that place would go nuts.
Thomas Alexander, Don Carson, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another one, I think we're going to come up to it, but another one that drew everywhere he went in whatever capacity he was Dennis Condrey.
Yes.
I mean, you think about it. He started off the first time I ever watched a match with him against the Stomper, and Stomper stomped him real good. But anyway, I mean, you think about it. He and Phil Hickerson, great team. Dennis Condrey, David Schultz, just a great team. Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose, and then Dennis and Bobby, just a tremendous wrestler. Knew the business inside and out. Tremendous mind when it comes to wrestling.
Adrian Street, I can't see that. I don't know that Adrian Street was a box office draw. He was a great wrestler, but I don't know that Adrian Street was ever put on a main event that he just packed houses. Am I right or wrong about it? I mean, am I just missing something?
I'll agree with that. And Adrian, if anytime anybody tried to push him into the top level, he would start wanting to do all the stuff that was not acceptable here.
Yeah.
And so it was not really a fight, but you had to keep a thumb down. And Adrian's one of my favorite guys to ever share a ring with and sit and talk to. But no, I don't believe he was ever a top draw.
Rodney?
Adrian is someone you build up. Dusty proved it in Florida that you could build him to that level, but you're not going to see Dusty. I mean, you're not going to see Adrian in the main event against Dusty sitting on Dusty's arm and doing the gigantic, arm thing where he's trying to choke his arm to death.
Yeah.
You're not going to see that. You're not going to see him do the pinching and any of that stuff in that main event status, but in that particular match. And you're right. In some cases, he still wanted to do that shtick in the main event. That is not where that belongs. It belongs in the other matches.
That is your supporting card and not your main event. So
and in that case, he's a novelty act and not a major draw, where Dusty produced him as a major draw. Even Jimmy Crockett, the Crockett's produced Adrian as a major draw with Jimmy Valiant.
Yeah. And probably made sure that he went overboard on a lot of things. Yeah. One match was a cage match in Boston. I guess Bruno and the Sheik. The Road Warriors, yes, we forget about them. Major draw in wrestling. But put the Road Warriors on the card. And we've seen it in Memphis. We talked about it on our YouTube channel. You can go and see it. I think it was the Memphis 1984 cards. The Road Warriors would put on the card. The crowd went up big time. They were not on the card the next week, and the crowds went down. So it showed the Road Warriors drew the crowd. They were an attraction that you could put on the card and people would come and see them. There was a time that maybe they're in the 90s. But didn't they have a lot of problems in the 90s where they quit teaming with each other and then
Animal got hurt and he had one of those Lloyd's of London insurance policies, so he sat at home 4 years, I guess. But he got all the money he could out of that insurance policy before he ever came back to wrestling.
Let's see. He was in Georgia for a while. Not for sure we done. Coliseum. He said it was the Macon Coliseum.
Macon Coliseum.
Michael Barr said, thanks, Jack. Let's see. The Coliseum. He said the first time, he said the Coliseum, the paper did a story on it. First time I'd ever seen the paper do more than just the results. Terry was on the card too. 77 is what Mickey Mayfield said. I think that's the
Abdullah and gets Sheik.
Sheik. Tanja Matthews said, fun fact, my mom and dad were in the first mixed tag team match in the Omni.
Wow.
Tremendous. We are going through and doing Georgia Championship Wrestling. We're going to try to go through everything all the way to even when the WWF starts running Georgia. But we did do a video, but for some reason, the sound was just horrible in it. So we're going to go back and do that one over again. And then we're going to pick up and we're going to go from the 1930s all the way to possibly whatever's going on now in Atlanta.
For anybody that doesn't know, Tanya's father was Big Bill Drummond.
Yep. Richard Hood, the Freebirds, was a Southern attraction. Yeah, they drew a lot of money.
From what I saw, they did really well as well for Vern Gagne.
We
like to call him Vernie Gagne. Yeah. For those of you who don't, Vernie Gagne.
I don't believe WWE have any intent of giving them anything. And I think that was a huge mistake on Vince's part. But he hated the South and anything that come from it. And yet, Steve Austin became one of his biggest stars of all time.
My apologies, Mako. I'm caring for my 93-year-old mother, and she needs me. I hope to make it back in time. If not, bravo, Drew, Vicky, and the rest is history. I just read what he said, but Randy laughed at Pickles. He laughed. Scott said,
need to get some T-shirts of that.
Rodney, why did you have to show a wrestler named Pickles during my question? I'm going big time heel.
Hey, that's the big star right there.
Rock and Roll Express. Yes, they were a big.
Yeah.
Yes, they were.
Especially in Louisiana. And when they brought them to NWA, man, they were over. They were over when they got here. When they got to the NWA, they didn't have to do anything to them.
Yeah.
Michael Bott, remember, Wrestling King of Sports. Great logo.
If you could see it at the Boutwell Auditorium, they have a drop ceiling in the front entrance. But if you could take that drop ceiling down, they have it painted Wrestling King of Sports.
Oh, that was those days. By the way, today is our son's birthday. Well, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, yeah.
Michael Barr. What is the longest main event? What is the longest main event from the late 70s, and how long did it go? They were having 90-minute matches back in those days. Yeah. And Harley Race had a couple of those.
Two and Stan Hansen had one. Yeah. One of those. It was a 90-minute time. They were in the 75th minute. Let's see who else. Oh, Wahoo McDaniel and the Super Destroyer, the Spoiler, had one.
Great podcast night. When will we see Rodney and Kevin Sullivan at territory matches? And Jim,
we'll start seeing them. You'll notice them. It'll be a montage of low blows.
We need to find somebody that can do a cartoon short for us, the two of them.
This is true. And since we're going to be the one that gets the cartoon thing of them, Rodney will go over. He'll go over. Thank you.
I want to do it because I cut the tree of woe down and it fell on him. Not the tree of woe.
I want to thank everybody for being a part of Pro Wrestling Inside Out. We certainly do appreciate it. This week alone on Facebook, 822 people became new insiders for us this week, and we certainly do appreciate you being a part of that. Every week we grow on Facebook, not as fast on YouTube. So tell people about YouTube. tell them to go on there. We grow faster on Facebook we do on YouTube. We did grow somewhere around 68 people on our YouTube channel this week. We certainly do appreciate it. You are sharing it, and we do appreciate it. Rodney, anything we need to talk about before we leave?
I'm gonna be very serious here for just a moment. It was a very, very troubling story I heard this past week about The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. He has been sued for kidnapping. It's a terrible ordeal of $3 billion. And there was a conspiracy apparently with several other wrestlers to kidnap some woman and her kids. Terrible situation. And it was such an eye opener of The Rock, this criminal going out and kidnapping people. Just terrible story.
I can't remember her name. Something Khan. And I met her once, so I'm surprised that I'm not in that lawsuit.
Did you? Were you in on the kidnapping, Jack?
Well, I thought somebody should take her away because she was weird.
Well, did you feel sorry for the kids, and she just thought that you were taking the kids that was child services, and she thought they were being kidnapped?
Ain't she suing like 52 people? I even seen like a TV station that was in on that.
She said it was a conspiracy, a wide-ranging conspiracy.
Very, very troubling.
Oh man! Well,
wait. James Brown says the Home Depot.
Who can forget this?
What about Home Depot? Says the Home Depot is in that kidnapping charge too. She sued them too.
What Home Depot have to do with that?
Oh my goodness! I saw that and I was like, "What in the world?" And then I read the story and it was. Why is she not a candidate for a straitjacket? Could be because Tony Khan's wearing it right now.
Could be.
All right. Thank y'all so much. Hey, and by the way, if you want to get over there and get our poster, remember it's on Facebook, and we certainly do appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'll see everybody right here next week on Pro Wrestling Inside and Out.